letter written at the age of 9. Its most important sentence: one day we will be engaged. And what happened at the end of 20 years? This story is a very different, deep story beyond football, beyond the most watched stadiums in the world, beyond the most watched goals. In those years, Messi was still an ordinary child whom nobody knew, playing in the youth infrastructure of Newell's Old Boys. He had a teammate he loved very much. That was Lucas Scaglia. Lucas and Messi were an inseparable duo at those ages. After practice, they would spend time together, going back and forth to each other's houses. This was an ordinary childhood friendship. But who could have imagined that this friendship would be the beginning of a great love? One day, Messi went to Lucas's house again. But that day, something different happened than usual. Inside the house, there was a little girl who was Lucas's cousin, Antonela Roccuzzo. At that time, she was only 8 years old. According to those who witnessed the event during that first encounter, Messi had taken a liking to Antonella. But the problem was that Messi was an extremely shy child. He was not talkative, he liked to stay in the background in crowds, and he had always struggled to express his emotions clearly. However, this liking did not stop Messi this time. Putting his shyness aside, he tried to talk to Antonella. In a short time, the frequency of his visits to Lucas's house noticeably increased. Every time he found a new excuse. Sometimes he was going to get a ball. Sometimes he said, "I just dropped by." Sometimes he showed no reason at all. What made him do this was love. There were those in the family circle who noticed this. A small child, exerting so much effort just to see a girl was considered ordinary, yet nice by everyone at that time. Despite his young age, Messi was so eager toward that girl that this was actually what everyone found strange. He was very persistent and very full of love for a child. One of his older brothers one day saw Messi sitting in a corner of the house, writing a letter to Antonella. In the letter it said, "One day when we grow up, we will be engaged." A 9-year-old child, without even fully knowing what love was yet, giving such a clear promise about the future, was actually a gift from fate to them, because it was not written with consciousness, but as if written by the hand of fate. However, his brother did not take this promise seriously, of course. This was a sentence spoken between children that would be forgotten over time. But these sentences were not just a child's dream. This was the first sentence of a story that the whole world would later call the wedding of the century. This story that happened, this love felt, was a story between just two children, recorded by no camera. No journalist reported on this. Only two families, a few neighbors, and the children themselves knew it. But this is how real love stories often begin. Quietly, unpretentiously, without anyone noticing. At those ages, Messi's football career was still in its infancy. Barcelona discovering him was still years away. Growth hormone treatment, the decision to move to Spain, the difficulties his family would face. None of these had happened yet. As you can understand, we are at the very beginning of Messi's life. But one thing had happened. That love in Messi's heart had begun when he was 9 years old. Unfortunately, this innocent beginning would not last long, because life would soon put these two children on a path that would separate them from each other. If you also want to listen to the whole life story regarding Messi and be aware of these, don't forget to subscribe to the channel now. Life presented a cruel test to this innocent childhood story 4 years later. Before long, when Messi reached 13 years old, he learned about that disease that darkened his life, growth hormone deficiency. This disease of Messi would affect not only his health, but also the future of his entire family. Barcelona's scout teams, who were watching him around the time he learned about his disease, despite learning about his disease, notified his family that they would both take him into the youth academy and cover his treatment. However, they had an offer for this. Messi's family also had to move to Spain, and thus Messi's life changed in an instant. He had to leave Rosario, its streets, his friends, and that innocent bond he built with that little girl behind. Antonella, on the other hand, stayed in Argentina. She tried to live a normal childhood and continue her school. The paths of the two children had separated geographically by thousands of kilometers, and like most childhood loves, this bond began to fade quietly over time. While Messi grew up in Barcelona's academy, Antonela was building her own life in Rosario. The communication between them gradually decreased. The letters stopped. The childhood promise began to turn into just a memory. Years passed. Messi was shining in Barcelona's youth teams, his name slowly being heard. But this success was pulling him even further away from his life in Rosario. Nobody thought at that time that these two children would come together again. Life seemed to have swept them in completely different directions. In 2005, a very painful event happened in Antonela's life. A close friend of hers lost their life in a traffic accident. This news reached Messi in Spain from thousands of kilometers away. And Messi, without making any press release, without appearing in front of any camera, jumped on the first plane and returned to Argentina. This was not just a visit. This actually showed that Messi's love for Antonela was not over yet. Years of silence and distance had ended in an instant. On one of the darkest days of Antonela's life, Messi was there. He had come to support her, to be by her side. This moment became a turning point in both of their lives, because this was not just a courtesy visit from an old friend. This was proof that that childhood bond established years ago was still there, still alive. Messi coming to Rosario would serve as the occasion for their communication to restart. First simple conversations, then regular meetings started to happen. Despite living in different countries, they kept their bond alive through phone calls and visits. While Messi's football career grew rapidly, this quiet but strong bond was also slowly being reshaped. Nobody knew that a tragedy experienced in a traffic accident would actually become a bridge bringing two people back to each other. But this time, it was not innocent and uncertain like in childhood. This time, both of them were now grown adults who had tasted life and losses. Their relationship began to reshape with slow but sure steps, and then the process of becoming an indispensable part of each other's lives. But this was by no means an easy process, because Messi was no longer just a boy from Rosario. He was the rising star of Barcelona. With every passing season, his name was talked about more, and stadiums full of people watched him in every match. Antonela, on the other hand, was continuing to build her own life, her own career in Argentina. She was continuing her dental education, while step by step learning what it meant to be included in the life of someone world famous. Carrying on two different lives on two different continents would be difficult even for an ordinary couple. But in this relationship, there was nothing ordinary. Even in the light of fame, Messi and Antonela chose to keep their relationship as calm and unpretentious as possible. Neither was Messi talking about the one he loved in interviews, nor was Antonela talking about Messi and Rosario. And after some time, this relationship had reached a point where it could no longer be maintained from a distance. And after some time, Antonela decided to move to Spain. This was a big sacrifice for her too. She was leaving her own country, family, friends, and the life she was used to behind. But she chose this to be by Messi's side. Just as years ago, Messi's family had left Rosario behind for him. Now Antonela was making a similar sacrifice of her own free will. They started building a life together in Barcelona. While Messi made history on the pitch, Antonela became his biggest supporter, his most loyal companion. As the years passed, their relationship deepened even further. In 2012, their first child, Tiago, was born. This opened a new page in their relationship. Now they were not just a couple, they were a family. Even while celebrating his biggest victories on the field, Messi's eyes always drifted to the stands, to where his family sat. Antonela and little Tiago carried a meaning more valuable for him than any success on the pitch. Shortly after, in 2015, their second child, Mateo, was born. The family was growing, their bonds were getting stronger, but still they were not officially married. They had been together for years. They had 2 children, but that promise written in that childhood letter had not yet been fully fulfilled. Perhaps this was the most special part of their story. They did not rush it. They did not show off. They built their relationship, just like Messi's understanding of the game, patiently, calmly, in their own timing. And in the life of the most talked about footballer in the world, the quietest but strongest story was precisely this patient love story. While everyone was talking about his goals, awards, and records, very few people knew that his real victory had already happened long ago. He was still together years later with the girl he promised in his childhood. Finally, in 2017, that day arrived. On June 30th, 2017, Lionel Messi and Antonela Roccuzzo got married in the same city. In the city where their story began, in Rosario. This was no ordinary wedding. The Argentine press named it the wedding of the century, held at a hotel and casino complex. The ceremony was attended by the most famous names of the football and entertainment worlds. Shakira and her husband Gerard Piqué, Messi's teammates at Barcelona Neymar and Luis Suarez, and about 260 guests were there to share this special moment. Antonela walked onto the stage in a dazzling wedding dress. Messi, on the other hand, was waiting for her as a man very different from that child who ran with the ball in those same streets years ago, but whose heart was still the same. The couple's two children at that time, 4-year-old Tiago and 1-year-old Mateo, were in the front rows of the ceremony. Messi's childhood friend, Diego Vallejos, had said these words to journalists that day. They are the love of each other's lives. You don't know anything yet. In the Las Heras neighborhood where Messi grew up, on the night before the wedding, even street vendors were celebrating this special day. A hot dog vendor in the neighborhood had said, "I wish Leo good luck." And to Anto, who is so simple and sweet as well, it was a genuinely good feeling that a man who plays in front of millions of people in the world's biggest stadiums chose to hold his wedding in that small city where he grew up, where his neighbors still know him, where they still call out to him as Leo. This was no coincidence. This was a reminder. No matter how much he grew, no matter how famous he became, his roots were always in Rosario. That simple letter written by a 9-year-old child came true 20 years later. And perhaps this was the greatest achievement of football's biggest star. Without letting fame, bright lights, and the world change him, he was able to stay true to the promise he once gave. And the story of Messi and Antonela is exactly this. A love story that started in a dusty street of Rosario, continued on the world's biggest stages, but always remained the same at heart. If you don't want to miss hearing more real-life stories about Messi, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.